Welcome to the Third Wave. This is the 5th program in a new series for and about life after 50. But it's a series with a difference, in which we aim to dispel many of the misconceptions and the myths about the mature section of our society. The older people of Britain are increasing in number. And within the next few years, there'll be nearly 12 million over the age of 60. By the year 2026, the majority of the adult population will be over 50. Today, we're here in the studio to discuss the issues raised by the first 4 programs of the Third Wave. In the first half of this discussion, we will talk about the first 2 programs of the series, which looked at the relationships within a 3-generation family, and particularly at the role of the grandparents within the family unit.
If you ever found yourself in deep trouble, who in this family would you have go and talk to?
I think probably my grandparents, because Mum can get very upset and not very helpful because she gets very angry and
Understandably,
upset. Yeah.
Understandably. Do you worry about being infirmed in any way, about being ill?
Yes,
You do?
Yes.
I hope that I never have to end my days in a home for an old, older people's home.
We term ourselves as the Wrinklies.
I dread the thought of having to leave my home.
I wanted to get out of the centre of the river into the bank, and we never achieved it until Paul came along to stop us arguing, tied us up and towed us home.
Is that right?
I would throw him back. I would put him back in the river at this moment.
So I think once the family have grown up and made their own families, you do relax more. Once a parent, you're always a parent. You still feel for those children and their children, but there's a level at which you can interfere in that family. You have to hold back. But I must say I've enjoyed this stage of our life very, very much.
Now, our first 2 programs, they centered on the Montague family, and they're all here with us today. We're going to talk to the other members later, but first of all, I'd like to talk to the youngest. Simon, can you tell me a bit what role you see them in?
Well, through different stages in my life, they've played a number of different roles. The original role was a babysitter, carer, changing nappies.
Yes. You remember that?
Some of it. And,
there he is.
At this stage of my life, they play the part of people to be cared for. They're somebody...
So it's kind of changing.
Yes.
Yes.
Care. We interact with each other.
Are there any other young people here who can tell me what role their grandparents play in their life?
I think it's somebody you can talk to.
Yes.
Because you can't really talk to your parents sometimes. And if you go to your grandparents, they can sit there and listen to you because they've been through more than what your parents have been through.
So you'd go and ask their advice perhaps over your parents, would you?
Yeah, of course.
Norma, I wonder if you could tell us what role you see them playing in your family.
My parents have been very important to me, and in terms of our little family, my parents have always been in the background, and they're a very supportive part of our family. They're very important to us.
John, do you have your parents living?
Well, my parents both died when I was a youngster, and my wife's parents live a long way away, and therefore my 2 children hardly see their grandparents. But I think my wife and I have compensated to a certain extent, because obviously, unlike a lot of young people in the audience, my own children don't have the availability of a grandparent. But I do think that we are a close-knit family, and I don't think they suffer as a result of that.
And how about you?
Well, both my children's grandparents are alive, both my parents and my wife's. They only see them perhaps two or three times a year, But we make an effort to try and go and see them. But the decisions of the home make no reference to grandparents. All the decisions we make as a family of 4, and not as a larger family than that.
So they are enriched in a way by having grandparents, but they're not, as it were, authority figures in any way.
That's right.
I see. Ginny Jeffries, now can you tell me what you think is the grandparent role?
Well, first of all, I think I'd like to say it's dangerous to generalize. I think as the studio audience has shown us, the grandparents have different roles in different families. But for me, much depends on the earlier relationship between parent and child. And it's my experience that if that relationship is experienced as supporting and the parents are an integral part of the growing up process, then they will be included and want to be included in a 3-generation family.
Yes.
And also there's another point, which is that the role of the grandparent, I think, changes with the aging process. As we saw in the first programme, Norman was getting ready to hand over his provider role to his younger son, because he knew that he couldn't sustain that forever and shouldn't.
Wally Harbert, who is the UK director for the Help the Aged.
Well, I think, again, as your audience has shown, there's a variety of situations about elderly people. A lot of them are what we might call young elderly people, who are very active and very often have command of resources and can be a very positive influence for their families. As they get older, sometimes they're less able to provide that kind of assistance. They're less able to be independent. Very often they have few resources. And they're the ones, of course, that we're most concerned about. They can't easily manage on their own. They need help. And perhaps the biggest thing we can do is help them to feel needed. I mean, the biggest problem about being very elderly is you know that you're not needed. And I think we should all do our best to make sure that the elderly people that we know are somehow brought into the family, are somehow helped to see that they can be a great influence.
I think that cultures in all parts of the world have always respected their elders. And grandparents, to me, are the family elders, if you like. We look to them for love, but above all, we look to them for their wisdom and experience. And they also represent a kind of link with previous generations, and that is fascinating. Remembering my own grandparents, that was certainly the role which I saw for them, was to pass on their wisdom and experience and to tell me about the past.
If you think that attitudes have changed, how much you think that this is to do perhaps with what we're always hearing about, the breakdown of the family and the rise in divorce rate? We've learned that, of course, you and Dorothy have a very close relationship with your grandchildren, don't you?
7.
Yes, all 7 of them.
Yes.
But you don't live near these ones anymore, I believe,
No,
near
they live in
Norma's
London.
family.
We live in Southampton.
Yes.
We do visit quite often, but our relationship with the grandchildren here has been rather different through family circumstances. We've had those children as babies, and the bonding grew from very early age.
Yes. Ginny Jeffries, do you want to come in here?
I think it's interesting, the views we've got here in this audience, because I think sometimes some grandparents take on a poor me type position and sort of sit there waiting for the grandchildren and their children to visit. What we have here is quite a few active grandparents who get very involved in their grandchildren's lives.
It's encouraging,
so they
isn't
go
it?
out to meet. But I think also we must remember there are a large amount of older people who are unable to be the grandparents they'd like to be.
Yes.
Either through illness or they're despairing of their own lifestyle.
Yes.
So I think we have to keep that. Although we've got some very active grandparents around, we have to keep that side in view as well, really.
Jim, would you like to come back here?
I think that because, as you said in your early introduction, that we are living much longer, we've perhaps got to think in terms of 2 ages of grandparenthood. The young grandparents who have perhaps just retired, and then those who are older and perhaps frailer and more infirm, and who become more dependent upon their children and grandchildren for support. I think that's terribly important.
Yes,
we
we
do
mustn't be too
recognise
generalising.
That's
the
right.
way we talk about them.
I think we all admired Norman as he abseiled down the rocks the other day.
Incredible.
But there are clearly grandparents who aren't going to do a lot of abseiling, and we have got perhaps to recognise that old age is now not a period as it was of perhaps a decade or 15 years. It's perhaps 2 decades, maybe even 25 years.
Especially as people are going to be retiring earlier.
Indeed, and that is something that as a Member of Parliament, one is conscious that the governments are going to have to take note of. We're going to have to make provision for the very old whose own children may well be reaching grandparenthood.
Yes. Do you think that the adult children and the grandchildren ought to stay an integral part of that living entity, of that family? And that as everybody gets older, across the 3 generations, do you think that those links are even more important? Or do you think it's okay if you let them go?
You're never on your own, you're always part of society, and therefore all the generations of the family belong.
Yes.
And you belong together. It's part of living. It's not a question of living one role or another role. It's just the continual process of living.
Ginny?
One of the things that concerns me is that women tend to hang on to the mothering and the grandmothering experience rather than get on with their own lives. And I do think that although one has to recognise the importance of those 2 roles, there does come a time when all of us have to get on with our own life and not fill it up with that process of either mothering or grandmothering.
But don't you feel that if you've got children, you've always got to put them first? You can't be selfish. You can't say, oh, I just want to go off and do this or that.
It's not a question of going off. You're being selfish if you look after them all the time. You've got to train them to look after the next generation. So that it's as well to say, oh, I've got such a headache, could you make me a cup of tea? Or would you make me a cup of tea? And better still, for them to recognise when you'd like them to make you a cup of tea without asking them.
Yes.
So that it's training them for life all the time, and you train them from your age range, don't you?
Well, I think you reap what you sow, really, and I think you come to have a good relationship, as I've said before, from earlier years. But I would like to go back, because I do think that there are many grandchildren and children who go to see their parents out of duty.
I think first-time duty's been mentioned here.
We have a lovely set of grandparents here, and I think grandparents have a tremendous role to play in altering that, in what they actually give to the relationship, and taking an interest in their grandchildren and their children, staying active. For me, I think that's the basis. So it's a sort of a sharing, a mutual sharing, and a giving and taking at the same time.
In the second half of this discussion, we'll be examining who cares for or who looks after older people. Our programme 2 weeks ago looked at the radical idea of fostering older people into the family home as an alternative to residential care.
Well, at my age, 87, I mean to say it's nice to be people who talk to you and bring you around, you know, make you feel as though life's worth living.
If everyone started with a different attitude towards the elderly, because the attitude in society towards elderly is a terrible attitude, because it's a very young-orientated society we live in nowadays, isn't it? You know, if you look at adverts on the television, it's all a certain age groups, you know, and everyone's fit and healthy, but, you know, it's not like that really, is it?
Last week, we looked at the growing population of elderly homeless people. People for whom all other options had failed.
If the weather is good, any man can live this life. If the weather is real cold and real bad, rain, snow and ice, frost, then it becomes hard, you know. It is definitely harder for the older person. He's more perceptive to illness for a start, you know. And I think if an older person gets illness, it takes a long time to get rid of it, you know. No one knows the future, does it? No man can predict the future either, you know. But personally, what I would like is another home. You know, a flat, bed-sitter, maybe.
I'll see you in a couple of minutes.